Hi, I'm Rajiv, and today I'm here with Chelsea Miller, a knife maker, who is going to walk us through the steps of sharpening a knife the professional way.
Yes.
Chelsea, this method applies to not all types of steel, is that correct?
Yeah, sure. I use a high carbon steel, so it's very easy to sharpen on your own in your own kitchen because it will dull relatively soon with a lot of use, but you can bring it back to its original sharpness on your own without having to send it away to a professional.
So these are all knives you've made, Chelsea?
Yes, this is one of my table knives, and I also use this in the kitchen for small fruit and small veg.
How would you test if it needs to be sharpened first?
Generally what I would do is, I can already see just by looking at the edge, do you see anything on the edge that's kind of picking up the light in a particular way? I see a few little spots here.
Oh yeah.
See that? So oftentimes what happens is the edge of the knife will get bent, whether it's just from lying in a drawer or whether it's just from use. But what you want to do, unless it needs a lot of sharpening, which would be to recreate an edge altogether, all you really want to do is essentially take the edge from being a little bit curled over and bring it back to a straight position. So I can see that there's a little bit of a burr growing on the edge, which means that the edge is kind of curling over a little bit, getting a little bit bent.
I think a lot of people wouldn't even really think about what the shape of the edge of a knife is, but this is kind of crucial to sharpening a knife. We have the blade, right? We have the walls of the blade,
Yes.
but then the tip of the blade, you've shaped it to be what shape?
So a lot of knives will have a particular angle.
Okay.
I sharpen my knives to a 15-degree angle on both sides,
Okay.
which means that they're equal on both sides. Some knives, depending on what they're used for, have a flat side and an angled side. So it really depends on what angle your knife should be set at.
Okay.
I recommend for anything in the kitchen that you generally use a 15-degree angle. And you can buy a knife sharpener that you can drag it through that'll set that angle for you. Or what I'll do is I'll show you how to get generally that angle on a stone. But what's happening when it's a bit dull is that side of your knife is starting to bend a little bit. It can be microscopic.
Yes.
It's very, very small. When you hold it up to the light, you can often see when there are little moments where a little bit of that edge is kind of curled over. And you can also use a honing steel. I don't have one of those here today, but generally just a long pole.
Right.
You're not necessarily creating an edge or sharpening with that, but what you're doing is you run one side of the blade down the steel and then the other side of the blade down. And what happens is it takes any of those little bits that are curled over, whoop, it makes them straight again.
Okay.
But in this case, this knife is a bit dull because it's been used quite a bit between sharpening. So what I want to do is create a new edge. And the way that I achieve that angle is on a whetstone. So this has been soaking in water for about 20 minutes. So it's absorbed a lot of moisture.
It's an actual piece of stone.
It is an
It's
actual
not
piece of stone.
like a composite that's
No,
man-made.
this is an actual piece of stone. And to achieve this certain angle, it's really about finding in your hand what that feels like. So I think of a 15-degree angle as the same angle that you would use to peel an apple.
Okay.
So that's what I imagine when I'm on the stone. I think about this being an apple and how I would just pick up the skin of the apple. So this is how I set my angle. It's like, where would I be just picking up the peel? And you want to just bring the length of the blade down the stone and then back the same way. And this can be hard thinking about, again, that apple peel angle coming the other way. So it's good to kind of do it slowly and just drag it back a few times. I usually go 4 or 5 times on one side and then 4 or 5 times on the other side, and then go twice on this side, switch to twice on the other. And as you do this, it's really about the feel, getting that angle, but then also you might feel where it's kind of catching, where maybe that edge is kind of curled in. So I can feel a little catch right here. So I'm going to kind of focus on the end of that blade a little more.
So when you feel the catch, what you're doing now is you're trying to eliminate the catch by grinding it off.
What I'm trying to do is, if it's turned this way, what I'm trying to do is come at it from the other direction so it pushes it over the other side.
Okay.
And then as you go back and forth on each side of the blade, you're essentially, they're called a burr. So it creates a burr along the edge of the blade that goes, it curls to one side, and when you switch, it curls to the other side. And you do that repetitively until you kind of eliminate it. You work it enough so it's eliminated. Let's do once on each side, wipe that off. And then again, I just want to look down the blade, and that looks a lot, it looks a lot smoother. And then another way to test it is just with your hand.
Yeah.
But that's really the simplest way to bring your knife back to its original sharpness, is with a simple stone. And this is a very fine stone because this knife really just has a little fine little burrs on there that need to be reshaped. But oftentimes you'll have a knife, or if it's sitting in a drawer bumping around into other knives, sometimes you can get little chips, in which case you'd want to be creating a whole new edge, which means you'd start with a much coarser stone, removing more material, and then you're refining it with a very, very fine stone at the end.
I've had this situation before where the knife was dull.
Yes,
Then I took it to the stone.
yes.
Then I did this, and guess what? It
was
was
worse.
even duller.
Yes. Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. So
like this-
it's really
I just want to say this to people, because don't just think that because you're going like this and you're going like this, oh, it's
Yeah.
going to be sharp. Like, oh, it's going to be sharp. No, it's not. The angles, they must come together in a complete, like, sacred point.
Yeah.
Like where there's no sin. And what I realized I was doing once when the knife was getting duller is I was getting rid of the point,
Yeah.
and there was an angle on this side, an angle on this side, and a flat part at
Yes.
the top. And that made me realize, wow, you can really be moving in the opposite direction when you
Yeah.
think you're grinding away. You're,
Exactly. What you were doing is you were actually too flat. So if I just pushed the entire blade forward without an angle, I would remove material from the entire blade.
And this consistency in keeping the angle with every stroke. And I noticed that when you were doing this, your hands were so steady. Like you're using your whole body when you're moving. So notice that when Chelsea's doing this, she's pivoting at her waist. Like her feet are on the ground, but she's not staying here and going like this. Because if you were doing this, your wrists are moving, and that's where it's so much harder to control the angle.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because just like with every step of the process of knife making, it is very important that you use a lot of economy in your body movements. And the more power that you have comes from being very center oriented. So keeping your elbows into your body and actually moving with your core.
Oh, your elbows are tucked into your waist. Oh, I didn't even notice that.
So when you're out here, your arms will start, I mean, it doesn't feel like it's a lot of work in the beginning, but as you go, your arms will start to fatigue, which will create wobble.
Right.
So you just want to make sure that everything is kind of settled in place and the strength is coming from the middle of your body. I would recommend, for anyone who doesn't want to spend the time really getting into the way that it feels to be complete, is using something like a countertop knife sharpener. So this is made by Work Sharp, and it's actually just a belt. So you can see that it's a sanding belt.
Yeah.
And this is similar to the way that I originally create an edge on my knives with a belt sander. What's great about this tool is that the angle is already established for you. So all you really need to do is drag the knife through the sanding belt, and you don't have to worry about that apple peeling angle. So this has 3 settings, which I love. So it has shape, sharpen, and refine.
Okay.
So again, if your knife was really quite beat up, you'd start with a thicker, more coarse belt, and you would put it on shape, and then work your way up to refine. So these knives are pretty sharp. They could just use a little refreshing. So I'll set it to refine. And then you just drag it through. once on each side.
Oh,
until it
oh,
stops.
you alternate that way.
And they say to drag it through an inch per second. It's like a very meditative, fun process. And it is removing material, but in a very gentle, even way. So I'm not creating hills and valleys along the blade surface. And it has a cycle, so it'll tell you when it's finished. But I really love this for home use. You know, if you go to cook something and you think, oh, you know, I see a little burr on there, let me pull out the little sharpener.
Okay, so we have our beautifully sharpened knives. How do you recommend people store their knives?
Ah, yes.
So I keep mine in a little block, but sometimes I've gone to people's houses where they're like, oh, the knives are in that middle drawer, and I open up the drawer and I hear jingle, jangle, jingle, jangle, and all the knives are just thrown in there. What would you say to that?
Ooh, it makes my fingers, I'm scared for my fingers when I reach in that drawer. Well, I would say that you'd spend a lot more time at the sharpening stone if you keep your knives in a metal drawer where they're clanging around together. It's something that really should be preserved, the integrity of the blade. So in a block is really nice. I use a magnetic strip so you can hang it on the wall so that they're together, but they never touch.
Okay.
Also, you could just have individual cases, or if you wanted, you could just wrap them in a kitchen towel so that they're all individual. You just want to keep them away from each other and anything else that they can scratch up against. I never put my knives in the dishwasher, even if they are technically dishwasher safe.
Yes.
For that very same reason, hitting other things in the dishwasher. I also think that the dishwasher runs at such a high heat, it can compromise some materials in the metal. So I always just wash with soap and water, and never like on the blade itself, just kind of gently with water and soap against a sponge, dry immediately, wrap it up or place it on the magnet so that it's always just, there's that extra bit of care will take you a lot farther in preserving the edge.
Can we hypothetically pretend like, okay, so I have my carrot,
Yep.
chop, 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 chop. I've chopped my garlic up, my onions. Now this knife, I'm gonna put it aside to be cleaned.
Yes.
What do you do? Like,
Okay.
if my sink's over here,
Yeah.
can I put it in the sink? What would,
You saw my face.
Yeah, like I would just love to know.
Okay, so
let's pretend you're
So
cooking
here's my
now.
carrot.
Yep.
So if I'm chopping,
Yep.
I will likely keep the knife in my hand as long as possible. I think it's really important to always have a dry hand when you're cooking. Here, I'll use the bigger one to show you.
Yeah.
Like I like to when I'm chopping, actually use this as a tool as well. So for scooping, that becomes my other palm when I'm working. So this is my tool for everything. I'm picking things up together. This hand always stays dry. And then it just goes straight from the task to washing. It never hits the bottom of the sink. I'll just take a sponge with soap and water, wet it down, and then just rinse it off. Same with the handle, and then immediately dry it and then place it where it's gonna live.
Okay. Handle care. If the handles are wood like this, is there anything special that people should know about so that they don't dry out, or that the wood in the handle is not compromised?
So again, moisture is really the worst enemy.
Okay.
But what I really love to use is a mixture of beeswax and mineral oil.
Oh.
So I make my own blend, but you can also buy it. It's usually called like a cutting board oil or a blade oil.
Yep.
So you melt beeswax, add a little mineral oil to create a consistency of like a paste. And what I love to do is just slather the handle with that mixture, and also the blade. The blade loves that as well. And then just let it dry for a while, and then just wipe it down before you want to store it.
Wipe the excess off.
Yeah.
Okay. Chelsea, I have some old things that I really love but I don't use, and I'll tell you why I don't use them, and I would just love to know what you
I'm so
what
curious.
you think. So my pottery mentor, Guy Wolf, they have a treasure trove of things in their house, and one day when I was looking in a drawer for something, I came across a knife, and I fell in love with it. And I asked Erica, his wife, about this knife. She's like, I think that's Guy's. And then they gave it to me
Oh, wow.
because they don't use it. But,
Oh, wow.
But the blade rusts a little, and I just love this thing. So
Oh, wow.
here's the knife,
Oh, wow, it's so gorgeous.
but the blade sometimes rusts. What does that mean? That it's not stainless steel, right? So it's
that means, and this is the same kind of material that I use. It's a high carbon steel.
It's the same as that?
Yeah.
So would your blades rust too?
Yes, that's why I wouldn't ever leave them in the sink. And they will rust. Like this actually has a beautiful patina. So there is a little bit of rust on here that you want to address.
Yeah.
But this is actually just a natural patina. And there's nothing that you necessarily want to change about that. And that's just the blade oxidizing in the air, in the moisture. If you cut citrus, it's going to kind of take on these little spots and discoloration that are perfectly natural to the steel. But this is a high carbon steel. I would guess that this is French or German, which is likely, considering its age, a very high quality steel. In that part of the world, generally all that steel was used for making weapons and boats, and wasn't ever really recycled with lots of other materials, like from other parts of the world where there's aluminum in there. It's probably very pure steel. So I would say that this would be fairly easy to sharpen, and to maintain it, you just want to be oiling it regularly.
So that's why it's rusting.
Yes.
Because somebody used it a few times, washed it, and then just set it aside without drying it, which is what I normally do. Because I'm like, I washed it in very hot water, it'll dry. That has been my...
Yeah, that's what's happening. It's actually quite porous, so it's pulling all of that into the blade, and then it's oxidizing in the air. So all you really want to do is, once you've washed it, just give it a quick wipe down.
Immediately.
Yeah, immediately.
And then that tip of putting the beeswax mineral oil mixture on the metal itself, that will help?
Yeah, that'll seal it from the air a little bit.
So I can use this knife?
Yeah, you can use this knife.
I'm so excited.
I would say that it has lost its edge a little bit, and it looks like someone has tried to sharpen it a few times. So when I look down the blade,
could have been.
Is this the knife we were talking about? So what has happened here? It's also a little bit crooked, so we need to straighten it a little bit. But what has happened? This is the way that you can really assess the edge. So as I look directly down the knife, both from the tip and from the heel. So if you looked at the very tip of that, do you see maybe that it's not quite straight?
Oh yeah, it's going like this.
Yeah, it's going like whoop a little bit. And then also you don't see an exact point. It's kind of...
It's like rounded.
Yeah, it's a bit rounded.
Oh.
And also then if you look at it from the side...
Who could have done that to this knife?
You'll see that actually there's a little bit of a valley there as well. So it's lost a little bit of its shape, and it's lost its edge, but it's perfectly salvageable.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. What we'll do is we'll put the tip in a vise and just bend it a little bit.
You'll put the tip in a vise.
Yeah, I'll do that for you. You can watch.
And then I found this thing last week. I just loved the shape, and it feels so utilitarian.
They look nice together.
Don't they?
Oh wow, it feels so nice. What I love about something like this, and to what you're speaking of, is that it's more beautiful than it needs to be.
Yes.
Right? It's aesthetically pleasing. Gorgeous. This may be, what does it say? Dexter. I was going to say this might be pewter, but I think it's actually high carbon steel. So this also, with a little bit of oil, we could make it shiny again. Although I like that look, and there's nothing wrong with
Like
this.
it's not unhealthy to...
It's not unhealthy.
Okay.
If you were seeing big flakes of rust, if there were, when you touched it, your hand was turning orange, that would be an unhealthy amount of rust.
Okay.
So, but just with oil, that will take care of that. But if you wanted to bring it back to its shininess, I would recommend using a very fine sandpaper, like 1,000 grit sandpaper, with a little water, and just buffing it out.
Okay.
And then oiling it.
Okay.
These are beautiful. I love this as a pair.
Thanks, Chelsea. Well, there you have it, from a professional. How to sharpen knives, how to store knives, how to wash them, and how to care for them. But also, how the simple aspect of using something that is handmade, that is made by someone you know, how that can bring meaning and beauty into previously seemingly mundane things like chopping up vegetables.
Yeah.
I think that the aspect of caring for tools, like you're more motivated to care for something when it means something to you. And I love that we had that lesson from you today. So thank you so much, Chelsea.
Thank you so much, and thank you for bringing these beautiful tools.
I can't wait to revive them.
Yes.